not enter the hall for several days. The community was concerned and went to ask, "Has the master had some slight illness or problem?" And the master replied, "I'm not ill, but the robe and dharma have already gone south." They asked, "Who to?" And the patriarch answered, "The able one obtained it." And the community then knew who this was. So Hui Neng starts by narrating that he followed the instructions to quickly leave, traveled south, and within 2 months reached these mountains. At the same time, while he was traveling south, at least to give him probably a head start, the fifth patriarch, after he sent him off, remember he saw him to the river and they had the exchange about who would row who across, and they did all that. He returned to the monastery and then did not enter the hall for several days. So in the routine of a monastery of this kind, sort of like a little clock. Everything works according to patterns and routines. Typically, a bell, drum, fish, some instrument is hit early in the morning, usually about 3:30, 3:45. Everybody arises, it's still dark, and they go to the main hall, and they do the evening recitation, which consists of reciting mantras, sometimes sutra text, and bowing, and chanting, and so forth. At that time, that's usually the first period of the day that you'd see the abbot or the master come down, and he might come down either to participate in that ceremony, in which probably wear the ceremonial red robe and stand in the center, or he might come in and just stand in the back of the hall and observe everybody, see how who's there and who's not there and what they're doing. And often, because these masters have, how shall we say it, very perceptive qualities, they can just tell by looking at all the disciples what's going on, the various states of insight, afflictions, worries, and so forth, almost in a diagnostic way. But he didn't show up there. So then everybody finishes that ceremony and they go on to different things. Some people meditate for a while, some people, the morning goes on and they go off, in this particular monastery, to work, because there's fields and a large amount of the food and produce is produced in the fields. So it's work and study and pray, or work and study and meditate. This is the routine. So off they go to the fields. Now, usually the abbot, unless he's younger, or the master is younger, he won't participate in those activities, but he might encourage. He might give some instructions, might come out to the fields and check. He doesn't show up there. The next logical place, and of course, this is the one that nobody misses. Some people don't make the morning. Okay, let's be honest about this. It's 4 o'clock, and people just, they hear it's a sound like this I explained to you, where someone goes along up and down the hallways, and it's not this wooden fish, usually it's something bigger, and it's, yeah, and then somebody sneezes because they woke up. And you hear that and you go, depending on your conditions, oh, wonderful, I can get up and go to the ceremonies. Or, oh my God, what time is it? It's dark out, it's usually cold. If you're in Asia, this is usually preceded by the rooster crow. Those who have not lived in a farm, any kind of fantasies about how sweet it is to wake up to the crow of a rooster, you'll lose that if you really go out and listen, because they are insistent and nonstop. And it's worse than an alarm clock. And they can start, if there's a full moon, they can start 2 in the morning. They think it's dawn. And so you hear this, but you might pull your blanket over you and skip out in the ceremony, and then you hope the master isn't there, that he doesn't know that you weren't there, and so on and so forth, and this little game begins. Or you may miss out on the work, but you're not going to miss out on the midday meal. So anybody who's not dead shows up for the midday meal. It's amazing. Sometimes we think you're in a monastery with just a few numbers of people. At midday, this hall swells. You think, where did all these people come from? Because the only food to be had is in the main kitchen, and this is a community, so it's community food. And there's different ways of serving it. Sometimes the food's on the tables, and the monks and nuns and lay people that are there serve themselves out of bowls. Sometimes servers go around and fill the bowls, and sometimes it's sort of cafeteria style, where you go with your own bowl and do it. And I've been through all three. But usually, almost without fail, the master, the abbot, is sitting in front of everybody who's eating, a little higher platform, and he eats overlooking the whole assembly. So if the master isn't there for one day, and you know he hasn't traveled any place, you get a little concerned, but you still think, well, maybe he's caught up in meditation or whatnot. 2 days, you're starting to get a little nervous, and by 3 days, you're really concerned. You're going to be concerned that he has a major health problem, that he's very sick, all untoward things, but you're not going to take it as a positive sign. So when it says he didn't show up for 3 days in the hall, this has possibly two meanings. The hall is, in fact, the eating hall. Okay, and sometimes the eating hall in different kinds of monasteries is cleared away and then becomes the lecture hall as well, depending on the way the architecture works. But this would also mean that he didn't show up in the evening, because this is the time, after everybody does their work, there's usually a closing day period of meditation. So meditation traditionally takes place as the sun's rising and then as the sun's setting. So it follows that sort of pattern. And in your meditation practice, you can use this rhythm, if you're in a monastery, to sort of reflect on the freshness of your mind and your spirit as you first sit in the morning before everything's all stirred up inside and out. And then in the evening when the sun's setting, you can sort of take stock and wonder, wow, what happened in between? It's still not as calm and clear as it was in the morning, and allows you to see sort of reflectively what you attached to, were moved by, disturbed by, or were able to deal with during the day. And it's a nice kind of reflective rhythm. Also, sitting at that time connects the coming into being of something and the passing away, and you get into the rhythm of all conditioned things come into being, dwell for a while, fade, and go. And so that daily rhythm keeps you mindful of the passing of things, of impermanence. And so there's many reasons for that way of doing meditation. But then in the evening, there's also a closing chanting of the day where all the assembly comes together and does their evening prayers. But followed this, a very important event in the monastery, usually the master or a guest of the master. It could be a scholar or another monk or nun that's visiting, will come and ascend to the formal seat and give a talk. And then they may talk and discourse on the sutras, and they may give more informal talks on the teachings and how to meditate and so forth. But it is a pivotal event in the day of monastic life, because the living instruction is probably next, well, depending on your attachments, I was going to say, or instead of food, the most important thing for you to feed off of, because you're there for a purpose. You're there to cultivate the will. All sorts of things come up in that process that you don't expect, coming up from your nature, your emotions, and so forth. And without that evening touchstone where these things are addressed, you're given some principles, you're given some inspiration in the person of the lecturer, but also you're there with your fellow cultivators, and there's a kind of clearing out of confusion and whatnot through these talks that are very inspirational. In some of the biographies and autobiographies we're reading now, coming out of the forest tradition, the monks report that when the teacher or the master leaves or departs for a long period of time to go someplace else or passes on, there's almost a kind of depressive spirit that hits the community, because that jolt of pure instruction and inspired teaching is no longer there, almost as if the fire's gone out on the hearth for a while. So this is a very important event, and for the master not to come would indicate something very serious, because he is taking care of all these disciples and nurturing them, and at the same time, they're depending on this energy, and nothing happened for 3 days. So at the meal and in the evening, there was nothing. Of course, we know now that he's doing this to give the Sixth Patriarch, now the Sixth Patriarch we can call him, a head start on getting away, because he quite correctly knows what's going to happen here with this group of people. Now, I know when I get to this part, a lot of people will have questions, and I'm going to anticipate them. You're going to wonder, and you're going to be shocked how in such a pure monastery with all this happening, so many of these lovely cultivators and quasi-enlightened beings would be so distraught that this guy got the robe and bowl, and then would actually be so upset that they chase after him. And it isn't to sort of like, gee, share the teaching with us, okay? So the community was concerned and went to ask, as he says, no, but the robe and the dharma. Now, he doesn't say the robe and the bowl here. He says the robe and the dharma, which is interesting. So he's actually saying, in a sense, the robe and what it stands for, which is, I have recognized him as the next holder of this teaching of the dharma, have already gone south. And I'm sure at that point, they're really, really bummed. And so they say, who? Who got it? Who to? And the patriarch says, the able one obtained it. Now, you know what this is a reference to, right? Yeah, I mean, this is also double. I hadn't thought about this till tonight. Able one means, huh?
The poetry winner?
Oh, well, it kind of, but what's his name? Wayong. Neng means able. You know? So if my name was, Martin Bright, then the teacher would say, the bright one got it. That didn't happen, but he could say that. And then, but it has this double meaning. Also, the one who is able got it. Not just the surname, but the one who is able to receive it and uphold it and understand it. And this is a double meaning here, because you'll see later when the Sixth Patriarch's about to leave, his disciples gather around and ask a similar question. Who's going to get it? Who are you going to entrust it to? And he essentially says the same thing. The able ones get it. And so it's not personal. Yes?
Do we know that he was taking those 3 days to give the guy time to move on? Because I don't understand why he just comes out with it and says, I gave the robe and bowl to this guy so quickly. Any good lawyer could tell him that you don't have to lie. You can just say, I'm not going to talk about that yet. And he could confront the disciples quite honestly. I see the point.
Yes. Well, we're kind of seeing the attorney class here tonight, aren't we? So a good lawyer is a bit of an oxymoron, but that aside.
I think of other reasons, like maybe just that if the robe and bowl are so symbolically important, which I sort of have questions about anyway, but this is a big moment in the life of the monastery. Maybe he wanted to sort of take a pause or give himself a little vacation, because his work was sort of done in that respect.
Oh, I see. I see. Well, I think you could say he might want to take a pause, but the thing is, in taking a pause in this way, he causes more consternation than not. So if he wanted to really take a pause, he'd say, well, I'm going to go down to my little hut by the water here, don't bother me for a while. But you also have to remember, so acutely is the competitive atmosphere in this place, right? You have to remember, monasteries are places you don't zone out. Okay, so if you think you go to a monastery to kind of like zone out, you don't. You're going into a rarefied room of light with mirrors at every angle. So everything is really accentuated and apparent to you. People are wearing, smells, who sits longer than somebody else, who comes in late, who gets what for lunch. Now you may think, well, wait, no, these are people. I'm just telling you, when you corral your mad mind and six sense organs down to a little arena, it's not like it goes quiet and still and you go, No, what happens is it starts to have a smaller area that it's bouncing off of. And so everything becomes accentuated. So the fact that he doesn't show up for 3 days And this guy who was in the kitchen, who we don't know what he was about, has also been gone. It's like, duh, they're both gone. You know, so there's some signals going off here, like, what's going on? Could it be that that guy who came in and did that verse really was the guy? And we didn't get it because he's gone and this patriarch's gone for 3 days. And somebody might even said, I saw the patriarch come back that night and his feet were wet or something. What was that about? No, I'm telling you that you would notice everything. And so I think it's safe to assume that, first of all, there is no way at this point he could just put them off and say, and at some point he'd have to come out with it, and maybe his point is, might as well just do it now and get it over with. Take the Band-Aid off and, let them have it. And then see what they do. And what we know next is, if he was at all intuitive about what their disposition might be and their behavior might be upon hearing this news, it's completely taken care of in the next paragraph. Soon, several hundred of them set off in pursuit. Okay, yeah, right. I mean, in a movie scene, you can just see this, right? I mean, they couldn't tie up their robes fast enough and get on their best hiking shoes, and out the door they went. They probably didn't even think to take any boughs of jouts or anything with them. No food, no water. It was like, get him before he gets away. All hoping to steal the robe and bowl. Now, I know this is where people's questions come up. Like, how could they be in the presence of this great teacher for all this time and still have this absolutely sort of coarse craving for the position? Now, I guess the only way to interpret this is, we'll get into this a little more, but it says they were craving the robe and bowl. So it wasn't as if it said they were craving the high dharma, and they thought that this was a very special dharma, and that's what they really wanted, and that he got it. And so that meant maybe they wouldn't get it, or they'd have to get it from him or something. If it was worded that way, you could kind of understand how they might chase after him to say, well, maybe he'll give it to us and share it. Maybe he'll teach what he learned. But they keep saying the robe and bowl. I think, I'm not going to push this too far, but I think the only conclusion we can make from this is they were interested in power and status and the appearance of accomplishment, which this conferred. Now, in the United States, you could walk all over the place in robes and bowls, and nobody would think, ooh, you the man, It's like, who cares? It doesn't have any significance. And you could say, well, I got it from my teacher, and they're going, cool, I guess. I got mine online. Mine came from eBay. It doesn't make any difference, but this was a very, very powerful symbol. If, for example, you were in the Vatican and you walked out with that tall hat and that mitre, and everybody knows you didn't get that at some trinket store, and the other popes waving to you on the balcony as you go off, it carries. I don't know what the exact power would be. We don't have that much symbols of power in the American experience, as much of it was started with the idea of reducing those things, those symbols, and trying to create a democracy. So even our president is called Mr. It's not like your honor or your high one or your exalted one, and he wears a suit, right? So the suit he's wearing, hundreds of men could wear that suit, and you would not know it was a presidential suit. There's no such thing. Now, I noticed that the Supreme Court had black robes for a long time, but lately, some of the supreme judges are wearing these chevron things and all so forth. So it's starting to creep back in. Next will come the gold, right? Because all these symbols of power, they actually subdue and control people. So this ostentation is a means of social control. But in this case, the robe and bowl confers the idea that this one is somebody in a rich spiritual tradition who has carrying forth all kinds of insights, understandings, and potentially spiritual powers that go with the people's association with this. Okay, you had a question, or?
Yeah, I'd like to ask. So what might be
You got to take the microphone.
Yeah. The- Back in the old days, when the king and the general go on to the battle, the king usually have a flag that gave to the general. And that flag carry, with the general, represent the authentic.
The authority.
So the authority,
Yeah.
and no one can be like counterfeit. So even with the Vietnam president, the last president, they still carry on with those flags. And so therefore, it's whoever hold that flags, that's the one that can I guess can be certified. And just the flag itself. And so therefore, a lot of the general, and they fight to the death just for that flag.
Yeah, for me, what you're saying is absolutely true, but I was thinking for me, I'd kind of like wait till the battle was over and we saw we won, then I would take the flag, because once you grab that flag in the middle of the battle, you're grabbing a target too. And so, but that being said, these are called symbols of investiture, meaning you are invested with a certain role, responsibility, and whatnot, and these accompany coronations, and they accompany things. And sometimes, at least in the European tradition, the investiture of a king or a queen was accompanied by also religious investiture given to them. So they were given both royal political authority, but also a kind of theological power and authority too. So these are the symbols of power and authority. When we were in Taiwan last year, they had a special display brought over from China, and it showed going way back, the symbols of authority that were passed along from emperor to emperor in terms of jade and scepters, and these going way back, and these were the power tools. When the palace was on fire and there was an uproar, the first thing that was grabbed were these things, and then people absconded and went off, because and they believe these things have a living spiritual power to them. They're not merely symbolic, but they actually convey the chi, and what you call the mandate of power and authority. So yeah, these things in a different culture convey a lot. So the robe and bowl, even though this is just really in the 5th to 6th generation, has already assumed that significance. And it's in a culture that gives significance to all these symbolic things. So it's the equivalent of the church's version of power. Anyhow, so one bhikshu, it says Hui Neng, whose surname was Chun. Now all of you with that surname should think, is this my ancestor? Was a rough and coarse-natured man who had once been a general. Okay. Now, when you say rough and coarse-natured in a general, this is someone who's cut his teeth, so to speak, in combat, in the real world, in the trenches. And he is both accomplished and a little bit brutally straightforward. He's not into niceties. He probably doesn't read a lot of philosophy. And he is also, when it says rough and coarse-natured, he's probably, and a general, used to getting his way and not used to being told, and is certainly, probably in this case, not used to losing. Okay, and he's lost. This fire cutter, wood gatherer, has got it. He was intent on finding me and chased me down before anyone else. Why? Anybody want to? Why before anyone else?
So he could get it.
Huh?
So he could get it.
Well, sure, but they all wanted it. This guy's got kung fu. Come on. He's an athlete. This guy works out, okay? Yeah, this is his business. He's a martial artist, and he's also a military man, so he's used to long marches, and he's used to exerting incredible bursts of energy for short or even longer periods of time, and to endure difficulties. You could see some of these guys who had been sitting in meditation, eager for it, about 2 miles down the road. Ouch, my foot hurts. I'm sweating, I'm hungry. Not him. Man, he's just going. So you can see him just racing by. He was intent on finding me, chased me down before anyone. Just as he caught up to me, I discarded the robe and bowl onto a rock hid in the underbrush. And I said, he called out. So the sixth patriarch now puts the robe and bowl out someplace and then hides himself away in the mountainside here a little bit. And he says, this robe and bowl are tokens of trust. How can they be seized by force? Now, it's not just a question. He's also making a statement here. Now, this is where we see a little bit about Wayong. And I have a little trouble with this passage because I'm not quite sure I believe Wayong. But let's go into this. Okay, Wayong went over to the robe and bowl and tried to pick them up. And he could not move them. So that's the first thing. Okay, so one interpretation. Do everybody know what Excalibur is? No, you have to explain what Excalibur is.
You have the microphone.
No, it's coming your way. That allows me to sip some water.
King Arthur was an early British king, and he supposedly was attained the throne by removing Excalibur, a sword of the king, from a stone, and only he could remove it. Everybody else tried and failed, and it was stone. And once he did it, they all knew he was king.
Right. And it wasn't glue or anything. It was in there, and only the person with the dauda, the virtue, could pull the sword out. And so King Arthur then became enthroned in that way. Okay, so that's one way to interpret this. This is Buddhist Excalibur. And Wayong, see, the thing is, and this is how Excalibur works too, because some of the knights that come up are awesome. Like, these are Schwarzenegger types, right? That kind of muscle, and they can't. And Arthur isn't known only for his prowess. He's not the most, but he's virtuous and wise as well. So it takes more than muscle to pull it out. So that's one of the things here. He couldn't pull it out. Now, and then he cries out, cultivator, cultivator. Who's he talking to? Wayong. He's saying, cultivator, I've come for the dharma, not for the robe. Okay, now I could read this in a number of ways. I could say, don't see that I just tried to grab that. I really didn't want it. That was a mistake. Really what I'm here for is the robe and the bowl. I'm here for the dharma. Right? Or he's actually being sincere and saying, I don't know what came over me. I really don't want that robe and bowl. I want the dharma. I just had an awakening. But if he had the awakening, why did he go for the robe and the bowl in the first place? You see, so it's a little...
Well, he gave up.
Huh?
He gave up, and then he finally gave in.
What?
I gave up. He just gave out. I first come in with a robe and a bowl, but now I give up. I recognize yours.
So it could be a very instantaneous recognition that my original motive wasn't right in this. On the other hand, what had happened if he was able to pick it up?
Well,
You
he will take it.
I rest my case. In other words, did he have a change of heart because he realized that the words he spoke, you can't take it by force, it has to be won by virtue, sunk in, or did he have a change of heart because he knew he wasn't going to get it? And now he had to face the prospect of going away empty-handed completely. He wasn't going to have the robe and bowl, and he might not get a teaching because where was the patriarch? He was hiding. So he was really in a dilemma here. Now, when it says he couldn't pick it up, of course, one interprets a soldier of fortune who stumbles into this far distant country north of India, which is probably in the movie meant to be Tibet, because it's governed by shaved-headed men in robes and so forth. And he goes into this country seeking power and wealth and fortune, because they were just British soldiers in India and they want to go back to England, rich men. And so a battle ensues, and arrows are flying, and one arrow goes into him, and he just keeps fighting. And pretty soon all the people go, oh, because the arrow's in him and he didn't die. And they think he's immortal. And they had a prophecy that such a white man immortal would come and so forth. So how the story goes. Well, he actually had a leather vest on underneath his thing, sort of Kevlar, early Kevlar. And so he pulls the arrow out and there's no blood. So not only did it not kill him, but there's no blood, which is the sign of the immortal. And they're all bowing, and he's going, what? And pretty soon he's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I think I'll go with this one. And he starts to accept this whole thing and think of himself as the king, right? And his buddy's with him, and his buddy's saying, Joe, don't do this. Don't go down this road. Tell him to be quiet. And pretty soon he says, who are you to talk to me in this way? And, and this whole, I won't give you the end of the story because it's not a happy ending. But the title of the man who would be king means the man who would pretend to be the king. And so a similar thing might be going on with Hui Neng here. He's thinking, sure, suppose I got it, but could I carry this out? And who would be convinced? Walking around like this, but for a layman, that is very unheard of. And so him bowing to him means he's now coming, I think, not from formality or appearance, but from the mind ground. He's coming from the heart now. And in this heart teaching, those distinctions hold no meaning. It's mind to mind. So he is now in a different space. I hope the cultivator will teach me the dharma. And I said, next page, so we're on page 18, if you've come for the dharma, then clear your mind of all thoughts and I will teach you. Okay? So the patriarch comes out. He has changed his attitude after this display by Hui Neng. And he's also showing one of the deep patterns in traditional Buddhist exchange, which is the Dharma, the teachings are given upon request. They're not just given ad hoc or given as I'm going to teach and proselytize and I go out, but there has to be a request because the request for Dharma determines the result that's given. In other words, Dharma is not some fixed body of doctrine in books, but it's a totally appropriate, liberating technique of response to a particular situation of who's asking it. So Dharma for one person would not be Dharma for another. So if somebody's afflicted with anger, the Dharma is going to be something that unties and cools that anger. If someone's coming out of a state of just unsettledness, maybe meditation would be the Dharma. But meditation may not be the Dharma for the angry one, and so forth. So every person's condition then determines what the Dharma response will be. And it has to be precise and therapeutic. It has to go to the heart of that condition. So that's why it's always done with request. It's not like a kind of superficial thing of you honor me by asking for it and then I get... No, it's about in the very way it's asked and the conditions under which it's asked will determine what the teaching is, especially in the one-to-one situation here. So he could say, if you say, well, what Dharma is he going to teach him? Let's not go there and say, what's he going to teach him? And we could all imagine, he might teach him the Four Noble Truths, like the Buddha did to the first scholars. Or he might teach him the Eightfold Path. Or he might talk about the 12 conditioned links. Right? What would you do? You've just inherited the robe and bowl. And now maybe Hui Neng is thinking, wow, it wasn't just a few days ago my teacher was saying, don't be in a hurry to teach. The Dharma is hard to propagate. And here's my first disciple bowing to me, and this is not an easy teaching. This is not some mild-mannered lamb who's just saying, oh, I just think you're wonderful, just tell me anything. This is a coarse general who's like, give it to me, man. I'm bowing to you, but I'm sort of like, don't BS. I want to hear the real thing. And so Hui Neng is now in a position to take on his first tough disciple, and he's there. And it says, Hui Neng was quiet for a long while. So was Hui Neng. So now you see this scene, this like frantic thing, comes together, can't grab it, bows, and then it says, hey, let's cool for a while here. So they're cooling it. And it doesn't say for how long. A long while. What's a long while? With attention spans of today, that's 15 seconds, right? Or maybe 10. And I'm not talking about kids, okay? It's like, he's not saying anything. Maybe I can text him. Right? Can you imagine? And Hui Neng said, let's be quiet for a long while and turn off your phone, and put. And so anyhow, he's quiet for a long while. Now, you might say, why did he do this? And it's sort of like the story of the young little novice who is ready to give his first lecture, and he accepts the meal offering, which is delicious food, and then he realizes he has to talk. So he says to the donor, let's be quiet for a while and meditate. And so the donor and he slips out and he runs away, so he didn't have to give the lecture. So maybe Hui Neng's buying time, or maybe he has something else in mind. But it's quiet for a long time, and I think we could pass this line over and then jump to what he said without getting what's really going on here. Then he says to him, before a thought of good and evil, right at that moment, what is Venerable Ming's original face? This is what he asks him a question. He doesn't give him a declarative. He answers his quest with another question. And when Hui Neng heard these words, he experienced a profound awakening. Okay, so let's pause there, because if we can go back to what I was saying earlier, that this is something that is crafted and particularly appropriate to Hui Neng, then we go back and say, is it? And it's interesting because he doesn't tell him something, who's this very powerful person. He poses a question to him. And for people who have sense of either intellectual or physical power, often it's very hard to tell something. You have to sort of come at it indirectly. Well, let me ask you this, or have you considered this? I remember when I was writing my PhD sometime, I had a professor I really respected. He was 93 at the time, and but he was super smart and super critical. So when he asked me to submit my proposal to him, I gave him my proposal and I thought, well, let's see what he says, because he's also been known to turn people into puddles of tears by saying, this? Might you think of another career? That kind of thing. But what he did for me, he gave me a 2-page, single-page, type page response. And it started with, might you consider, just that, might you consider, those first 3 words, and I knew it didn't fly, but at the same time, it was such a gentle, have you thought of this, have you thought of that, have you thought of this? So he was just kind of gently guiding me to recrafting the whole thing without hitting me over the head. It was beautiful. So in a sense, Hui Neng, putting this back to Hui Neng, he's putting it back on, okay, I assume that you can take this question. I think this question is going to help you. And somehow it does. Now, we might read it and think, gosh, I'm right here, I'm right on the edge, and people are listening online, and here's a line, before a thought of good and evil rise, right at that moment, what's my original face? And you're going, okay. And there's no profound awakening. Well, maybe I missed something. Which is exactly what comes up. Hui Neng experienced a problem, and then he asked further, other than these secret words and secret meaning you just uttered, is there yet another secret meaning? This is very interesting. He has this awakening, and it's like, I got it, or did I? Is there something else? Is it like, because this is like almost too simple. Is it kind of come on, what's the secret? Right? There's another secret, right? And the answer is beautiful, because it's right to the direct teaching that all beings have the Buddha nature. What I just told you is not a secret. If you look within yourself, you find the secret is with you. Wow. So it both confirms that there's nothing else, that the robe and bull are merely symbols, and it also confirms what he just understood. What's your original face? Not my original face or the Buddha's original face. What is your original nature? Who are you fundamentally? That's what original face is, just a metaphor for what is your fundamental nature. Who are you, essentially? At the deepest ground of your being, who are you? Wow. And he understands that that ground is the ground that Hui Neng has come from. It's the ground that the 5th Patriarch comes from. They're all coming from that space, which is, it's within, and it's who I am at the basic nature, which would then mean, when he says before thought of good or evil, he's talking about stripping down identity, even past the point of this good and evil kind of thing that we do to something that is even before the arising of that. So at the very least, it means you strip away all marks of identity that make you up. So this question is often used in meditation. Who was I before I was born? My parents gave me birth. What is my original face? Who is this? That's one of the meditation topics. And you go through it sometimes analytically. You say, well, I'm my gender, or I'm my name, or I'm my family, or I'm the son of, or the daughter of, or the husband, or the wife of. And you take all these identities and say, yeah, they're all constructed. They're all conditioned. Before that, I wasn't the husband, wife, son, daughter, and this happened, and now this could change. Well, I'm the PhD, or the MA, or I'm the doctor, I'm the engineer, I'm the lawyer. Yeah, well, those are all just like clothes. You put them on, you take them off. So you go through these. I'm my beauty, I'm my strength, I'm my intelligence, I'm my wealth, I'm my health. And you just keep looking and investigating. You realize all these things are just kind of conditioned, temporary costumes, if I can use that language. And they change, but when they're gone, who are we then? So if we lose this relationship, then who are we then? If the body starts to go, who are we then? If memory starts to go, who is this? If illness and aging take over, and then the health and the power of that vitality, are we still? And who is this? And so what you're doing is, in asking this question before this, is you're peeling away all conditioned identities or layers. And the amazing thing that's being suggested here is that when you peel them away, there isn't nothing, but there's something wondrous and whole and true that has been covered over, in fact, by all these others, out of fear and anxiety that maybe there wasn't. So somehow at this moment, Hui Neng gets this, and he understands this. But at the same time, sometimes with these powerful, almost spontaneous insights, and this I've talked, and I myself experienced, many of my students talk about that, they'll have those, or they'll go to a meditation session and they'll come out with that, almost like it's on the tip of their tongue. They can taste the clarity. And then within a couple days, the old habit energies come back and it's lost. Gosh, I should have written it down. Or I should have, recorded it or whatnot, because I can't find it anymore. Like waking up from a dream and then you can't piece the dream together again. And yet it seems so clear and tangible and absolutely right when you saw it. What's happening is the habit energy comes back and covers that over, and then you have doubts and second thoughts and misgivings. And so probably a little bit may be going on here with Hui Neng. He has a profound awakening. The timing, the medicine is perfect, and it goes right in. But so strong is the habit energy, so strong because he's been questing now for a long time. All of a sudden this thing comes back and it's like, but is there a secret too? Just to sort of see if there wasn't something else. And so it's a beautiful kind of exchange. It's very much getting at human nature. I guess we'll probably pause here for tonight, but one of the things I thought about when I was reading this, because I went online, he was quiet for a long while. And I'm wondering, whether it was the words that Hui Neng said, what was your face before, or whether it was really the quiet for a long while that was the teaching. And the reason I say this is, Hui Neng had pushed himself to the nth of this quest he had. There he was, right at the diving edge of the platform, about to get it, and he realized it couldn't be gotten by force, which is what he's used all his life. And all of a sudden, there's this kind of vulnerability he's experiencing. And he bows, furthering his vulnerability. And so when the master asks him to sit for a while and quiet your mind, he might have, in very, very rapid succession, emptied out a lot of stuff at this moment. If your whole life is focused on this one thing and all of a sudden at that moment it doesn't happen, sometimes it can really cause some reflection. For my niece, for example, I give you a mundane example, fell in love head over heels with knight-errant Mr. Wonderful, right to the day before the altar. And suddenly she saw him for what he really was. And she had a profound awakening. Called off the wedding, and called everybody, but after that moment was a very different person because she reflected, how did I get myself that close and not see things so clearly? And now this was my quest and it's no longer there, and am I better or not? And a sort of opening occurred in her consciousness that only occurs to some people that when someone close dies or when you have a death experience. So it's like he's had a death experience in a way here. Wayong runs to the end of this thing. His whole life is built on this quest. He's going to get it. Suddenly it evaporates, and there's a vulnerability and openness. And when he says be quiet for a long time, he might at that moment had a profound awakening. All it took were the words. You know, before that, and confirming you're okay. You have everything whole and complete. Don't worry anymore. Because the question is asking the affirmation of the fundamental nature. Because he couldn't say that unless there was something profoundly, inherently whole and true. And so it's a combination. When the Sharangama says, when the mad mind stops, when the mind quiets, that very quieting is awakening. In other words, the very process of quieting the thoughts is itself the awakening. The words that Hui Neng seems to utter here merely confirm probably something that was already present. And that's why the beauty, he goes back with his answer, the secret, and he says, no, the secret's within you. Didn't you just taste it? You know, it's just like it's a beautiful, subtle exchange between these two at this time. So anyway, we'll stop there for tonight. More to come. The younger students who study this, I ask them, what do you remember? I remember the adventure and the stories. Any principles? What? No. But the stories. So this is the first of many. Okay, we'll stop. Any questions, short ones, or announcements? Nothing to announce? Monastery events coming up? Anything? Do you know of anything? You live here.
So,
Don't let it goes out.
it's okay? At tomorrow, like usual, we have 9 o'clock Dabe Chan
Oh.
and 10:45 meal offering, 1 o'clock Buddha's name recitation, 2 o'clock I guess is the Jim Fosher offered the class with teaching bells. Use the instruments to recite.
Oh, so not calligraphy tomorrow, it's bells. Okay.
Yeah. From 1 to
Well, when you say bells, what do you mean bells?
bells. is
Like sleigh bells or what?
Dharma
Dharma instruments, okay.
Yeah, Dharma instruments. And 3 o'clock we have calligraphy lessons.
And there's calligraphy tomorrow too?
Yes, of course.
Wow.
And
I came through that class, nobody noticed me. Everybody is doing their calligraphy. Yeah, it looks good. And people are really good at this.
Yeah, and of course we
Yeah,
have
no, the calligraphy
daily
characters are
meditation
really
twice a
good.
day. Tomorrow also we open this evening ceremony, 7:30 Avatamsaka lecture. And Monday we have Buddhists from the Modern Mind, 7:30 p.m.
So when I asked originally, is there anything going on, any announcements? Nothing, except these 7 things happening tomorrow. Okay, let's transfer in English. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how escape the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding Li San Bao.